Ready? You have the cameras rolling?
Welcome to Outspoken.
This better be good.
A show about
floods, mutant, plagues, man-eating plants.
Actually, it's about thought-provoking, compelling conversations with people who have something important to say, a good story to tell, or knowledge we can learn from.
Oh, good for you!
And now,
Hold on to your butts.
here's Scott and Curtis.
Good God. What? Do you like a little mug in your coffee?
This is my bucket of coffee I have in the morning.
Dude.
Yeah, it's a little bit. There's plenty of caffeinating that goes on here, yes.
That's great.
All right. Well, hello and welcome to the Outspoken Show with Scott and Curtis. I'm Scott, and with us is our co-host, Curtis. Hey, Curtis.
Hey, Scott.
How you doing today?
Good to be with you. I'm very
Good.
excited about our guest today.
Yeah. Well, before we get to our guest, crazy week, huh? That was a crazy week.
No doubt.
Certainly, I got a quick story for you. And certainly, the folks in Fort Myers, I mean, that place was just devastated. And I feel terrible for those folks. I mean, some of those pictures are just nuts. But I have a quick story here. So I decided on Thursday, had a light afternoon, took some quick vacation time, and the hurricane had passed through. And I thought, well, I know what I'm going to do. I'm going to go surfing, because I had all of us, surfing's the new golf. And all my friends are calling me up and going, oh my God, the surf's great. So I pack up my board and I'm like, I'm going to walk to the beach. And I walk to the beach, and it's like 5 minutes away, and I'm out there surfing, and we're all, there's even pros in the water, and we're all just getting pummeled, but good surf. So it was fine until things started to change. And evidently one of those tails of the hurricane, I come to find out later, the hurricane was sitting 60 miles off the coast. I didn't realize that. I thought it was much further away. So one of those tails came around and whipped through. And so I got out of the water because the wind was picking up. It was just blowing so hard. I mean, the spray hurt. And,
Wow.
and then I'm starting to walk home. I can't walk home because the wind is so strong. I'm holding onto my board with two arms, and it's still feeling like it's going to get ripped from me. So I run to hide behind this outhouse, or, the beach little outhouse thing. And I have to stand there because the wind is so crazy. I can't walk home. And anyway, this guy named Wayne, another guy in the water, he stopped by and said, hey, you need a ride? And he picked me up and took me home. And even putting the board in the car was just nuts. Anyway, crazy
Probably turned
time.
into an airfoil, right?
Yeah, it was. Yeah.
Yeah.
One guy walked across the street and it was blowing him into traffic. It was crazy.
Wow.
Yeah, just
Jesus.
wild. But anyway, nothing like Fort Myers. But man, I think I learned something. Probably wait a little bit more, or look to see if there's any of those tails whipping around before you go out and surf. It's crazy. Anyway,
Well, the more you know. Yeah, we've got relatives in Bonita Springs, which is right next to Fort
wow.
Myers, and they decided to ride out the storm and have some neighbors. And fortunately, it sounds like they are loaded for bear, so they've got metal hurricane shutters. They've got the house locked down. They had generator power for up to 4 or 5 days. Food, so seemed like they were good, but they're dreading going outside because they just know it's gonna be terrible.
Yeah.
So
Well, heart goes out
anyway,
to those
hearts and
folks,
prayers
for
with
sure.
all those folks. I've been through a few of those hurricanes in Texas, and it's no
Yeah.
fun.
Yeah, well, that's right. You're South Texas, huh?
Indeed.
Okay. Well, joining us today is former Bloomfire CEO Mark Hammer. And Mark led Bloomfire from the startup into the recent sale to an equity company. And during that time, drove about 600% growth in Bloomfire. And so we definitely want to unpack that a bit. But Mark, welcome to the Outspoken Show.
Thanks, guys. Thanks. I appreciate it. It's good to be here.
Yeah. Fantastic. And Mark's joining us from his home in Berlin. So the first thing we want to definitely unpack is what the heck took you from Central Texas to Berlin? I mean, what drove?
The same thing that took you to Florida, surfing. No, no, my wife is German, and
Okay.
And during COVID, and we'd always talked about, I'd visited several times Germany and then Berlin. And then during COVID, we tested it out. We moved to, we actually spent a little bit of time in Colorado, and during Colorado, we were like, hey, we could just go to Germany and test that out for a little bit. And we did, with no intention of moving. I mean, our intent was just to spend some time there and think, could we do that later on? And we did it, and we liked it, and we thought, we could make a life here, not after retirement, but more soon than that. And then when Bloomfire went through the sale, I had discussions with the new board about the go forward, and told them that my intent was to try to move to Berlin, and through a series of conversations, we decided now was probably a good time for me to move, and that I couldn't stay, which was unfortunate. I really did want to stay at Bloomfire, but if I were them, I wouldn't want the CEO living in Berlin while you're running the company out of Austin. So it worked out, and it's fine for me, and I think fine for them. They found a great replacement to replace me, and I think the company's doing well, so it's all good. But yeah, it's almost 50 degrees here.
Wow.
It's almost dark at 4, 5, a little after 5, and it's been raining all day, so it's not great weather, but you get a lot of other things.
Little bit different than Austin, that's for sure. Although it was 55 degrees this morning when I woke up, and
Really?
expected 55 Fahrenheit and expected to hit 90 Fahrenheit. So 35-degree Fahrenheit swing. And
Yeah.
So Chris, you're in those 2 weeks of nice weather between the summer and the fall, or the summer and the winter.
Yeah, we'll get actually several months of good weather. Really, once fall hits. I mean, Austin's great until probably end of February, and then there's a couple of 2 or 3 bad weeks, and then spring. So
This is really a great time to be in Austin.
Yeah, it's really just the brutal 3.5, 4 months of summer that killer.
Yeah, the hair dryer. Yeah. So in Berlin, I mean, how are you liking it so far? How are you?
We really like it. It's an adjustment. Everything's been an adjustment. I mean, trying to figure out just everything has been very difficult, and it's kind of prohibited me from getting a full-time job, and I am starting to look, but it's taken us this long just to figure out what we're going to be doing and how we're going to be doing it. And we had an apartment, and then we bought a house, and so that moving was a lot. Everything is different.
Move.
Yeah, everything is different, and we had to sell our cars there and buy a car here, and it's just very different. And so we're getting through that, but we really enjoy it. We really enjoy the weird climate, even though it's very different than Austin.
Yeah.
And we enjoy the arts. We spend a lot of time in the arts, going to the opera and things like that in Berlin.
So Mark, I'm curious, did you speak German prior to moving to Berlin?
I spoke poorly. I spoke German very poorly, and I still do. I'm taking lessons and trying to learn and get better.
Yeah, good.
My daughter's fluent, so she has no problem. She's in school.
And how old is she?
She's 12.
12. Okay.
Oh, wow.
Great.
Perfect.
A great experience for her. Wow.
Yeah, that's great. It's good for her.
I'm really curious, Mark. What's the mood there in Berlin, based on the Ukraine war and the whole energy situation? I mean, what's the feeling there?
The feeling the way I would characterize it is hyper aware.
Mm-hmm.
I feel like in the States, and I think it's most of the States, people are not aware of energy issues, not aware of the war issues, not aware of Russia so nearly as much. And here, you walk down the street, I mean, even next door, there's a big Ukrainian flag in the window. There's a lot of support for that side versus the Russian side, and trying to and really recognizing that Europe is a force, and trying to instill that in others, and trying to make sure that people are doing what they can for that. You see, when you walk down the street, every 100 cars, 150 cars are Ukrainian license plates. A lot of Ukrainians have moved here.
Yeah.
And tons of people are helping them. The people next door actually have a family staying with them. And so that's really big. But then the energy crisis is huge. That is massive here, because a lot of the the oil that Germans use to heat their homes, which is starting to be a necessity because it's getting very cold.
Yeah.
It came from Russia. And so with that all drying up and the pipelines being blown up and all of that, it's on everybody's minds, and everybody's trying to figure out how to deal with it. And the government is doing what they can. I mean, they're trying to give incentives to people to to do solar energy, to buy electric cars, and then to use as little energy as possible. I mean, they're really asking people not to turn on their lights if they don't need them, not to heat the parts of their home that they don't need heated. I mean, it's just very different. And in the States, obviously, it's just not an issue. But
do you feel like it's unifying the country, really starting to pull the country together? Because that's what it sounds like.
Yeah, I do. I do think that all of that is a shared. I think everybody views it as a shared responsibility, and that's unique. I didn't see that too much in the States with anything, just because there wasn't that compelling reason. But that is definitely a unifying factor. And then they do things they know that your gas price is going to be very high, and so they give you an incentive to ride the train instead of driving. So they make the train tickets for the last few months have been €9 as opposed to like nearly 100.
Oh, wow.
To ride the train anywhere you want, pretty much. That's been a huge incentive. So just doing a lot to try to improve the conditions, control what they can control,
Yeah, that's kind of cool to see, isn't it? When a country pulls together like that, it's a nice thing.
Yeah, but you also realize how close Ukraine is to here.
Yeah.
It's very close to Ukraine.
Well, Germany received just a massive amount of immigrants, right? Northern Europe, Denmark, Sweden, Finland received just a huge influx over the past 4, 5, 6 years. Actually, even beyond that, right? When the Syrian war started.
That's right.
There's a huge flood.
Yeah, and you get people who, just like the States, you get people who are on both sides of that immigration issue. The one of the things that's sort of modifying the impact of that is just the birth rate is so low.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And so in order to get things done in the country, you need immigration.
Yeah.
And so that's been a helpful factor there. But yeah, it causes strife as much as it does goodwill.
I saw something that was interesting, and there was a poll published in Der Spiegel, which is one of the more left-leaning newspapers in Germany, and the poll was striking to me because it reported that some 40 to 42%, I think it was, of Germans, they were asking basically what's the zeitgeist, right? And the answer was anger. 42% responded angry. and
to
usually,
immigration or to
well, first of all, it was a question just about the general mood, and I thought that was interesting. But when they started breaking down the categories of response and what are you angry about and what things are top of mind, it was very much about policy decisions, German and EU policy decisions to move away from, move away from nuclear, move away from more independent energy policy, and adopting the green alternative standards that are sort of driving dependence on things like Nord Stream pipeline, which is now in tatters. And historically there had been that. There had been that, I won't say sympathy, but there's a bit of German-Russian cultural closeness, I'd say, over the past 40, 50 years. And Scott, you lived in Germany, and you can maybe speak to that if you saw that as well, although you were there, I think, when the wall was still up, right?
Yeah, I was there doing Glasnost, and so it was a different world altogether. But this sort of general resentment of America, has been a latent undercurrent in German politics for a long, long time, and I think now for a paper like Der Spiegel to report something like that, it seemed like maybe some of that is turning, like maybe they're starting to focus on Russia being the bad guy, on Ukrainian solidarity, on what can we do
with our own politicians, our own policy. And I think you're starting to see that in some of the elections around Europe as well, like Sweden, Italy, France. Macron narrowly survived a populist challenge there. Are you seeing that same sort of undercurrent in your movement and in the business circles, Mark?
Yeah, I am. I mean, and maybe it's because I am American. They're not, telling me those.
I'm not telling you to your face.
Negative side to America. I mean, it's interesting because I live in an area that's East Germany, former East Germany, and most people are, it's obviously changed a lot since Russia.
So wait, Mark, I want to make sure. So you live on the part of Berlin that was on the eastern part, on the other side of the wall.
That's right. I'm actually just west of Berlin, where I am. I'm just outside of Berlin, and so I'm in the former East Germany. Yeah,
that is crazy.
Their commissar territory.
That is crazy.
And it's funny because people talk about, they were one of the first people to move here, and what they mean is after the wall came in, because it's very, even though some of these houses are 100 years old, it's a very different.
What a crazy slice of history that is.
Yeah.
So
it is.
cool.
But yeah, I think the Russian invasion has changed a lot of moods. I do think everybody's rethinking energy policy because anything that already exists, if it can be restarted without a whole lot of effort,
Did I see that they were restarting? They're restarting a couple nuclear plants.
Some they're trying to figure out if that makes the most sense or if doing something else makes the most sense. It's a lot to restart some of these shuttered facilities, and so that's a big deal. And they're trying to figure out what makes the most sense. So
who's got the crank? Where do we put the crank?
Exactly. They probably didn't know how to use it. I mean, it's really it's a strange situation, but all that's to say, I do think it has been somewhat of a unifying force. It is causing division, just like everywhere. The energy policies, and then I think that what's happened in Italy and elsewhere, Sweden and elsewhere, hasn't gotten to Germany yet, but it's always a threat. I mean, it's a threat in the States just as it's a threat here.
Are you seeing, and just want to move on to some more business focused topics, but before we close out on this, are you seeing talk of prospective food impacts as well with the expected fertilizer shortages, which crop shortages?
I mean, I think everybody's anticipating an impact. I think it'll impact Africa. They say it'll impact Africa and other countries a lot more than or continents more than Germany, but it's going to impact them because all that, it's a circle. I mean, everybody's impacted by some devastated change like that.
Wow.
Yeah.
So let's talk business, Mark.
All right, let's do it.
All right.
Let's move away from this depressing energy and war and
but also very
shortage.
cool. Also very cool. I mean, living in the former East Germany, that's pretty darn cool.
Yeah, it's fun.
Anyway,
It's
go ahead.
neat. I think there's Scott has lived around the world and lived in Germany as well. I lived in the UK for about 4 or 5 years. There's something there's something to me very interesting about living in the UK, and I wanted to see if it rang true to you, Mark, and your move to Germany. At the time, this was the mid to late 90s, and I lived in the north of England, which is Leeds, England, which is now a financial, probably the second biggest financial center behind London. But at the time, it was still making that transition. So it was still the old mill yards of yore, and the Grim Nulf, all that sort of thing. And England just in general felt very tired, and since then we've seen a lot of startup activity come out of places like Leeds and Manchester and Doncaster and all those places in the middle and north of England. But at the time it felt really, I just don't know how else to describe it, because it felt like the weather, which was generally tired and gloomy. And I actually started a small consultancy there in England, and that was where I launched, and then I brought that back to the States. And it was surprisingly easy to do, and it made me wonder why more people aren't doing it. And I think that has changed a bit now. But I'm curious, do you see the same thing in Germany? Does it feel vibrant? And of course, you're in Berlin, but I mean, is Germany in general, does it feel vibrant? Does it feel young? Does it feel fresh, or does it feel a bit tired? What's that general business attitude?
So it's a mix.
Mm.
So one of the frustrating things about Germany is you can use a credit card in more places than you can in the States.
Yeah.
But you can't find a website that makes any sense at all. I mean, the online stuff is just so much. I mean, it's just not. Every website feels old. My kid's school's website is just you can't find anything.
Thanks, GDPR.
Yeah.
So Mark, that
ask for permission. Ask for permission.
That's your curse from now on. Having driven a company like Bloomfire and all that,
Yeah.
that is really your curse. You're
You mean
forever
we have to
going
ask
to be
for
stuck.
permission for this? Yes.
Exactly.
How many clicks does it take to get there?
Yeah. On the flip side, though, Berlin at least has a very thriving startup scene, but it's being driven in a way that I don't think makes sense. And that is to say that there's a bunch of VC firms in Berlin, and what they'll do is they'll post an ad for a CEO co-founder or a COO co-founder, and then they want you to bring them the idea and join them, and they'll give you money potentially if they like the idea and think you're the right founder to kick it off. So it's very like there's
That
more,
sounds
way
like
more,
that
there's
sounds like
way
the
more of
Angel.
that than anything else.
Like,
Yeah,
that sounds a
it's-
lot like the Tech Coast Angels, their
is,
style.
but
Come
it's
and pitch
very
to us.
like it's very just so it's startup-y beyond startup. Like that's not a startup. That's a hope and a dream and hopefully finding some talent. And I'm just not used to that. And so when I first got here, I was talking to these firms and I'd be like, okay, there's no there there and get very frustrated. Now that I understand that that's the way that they're trying to go about, reaching the market, I get it. And maybe that will work. But they have, you'll talk to a VC firm and they have 100 companies out there, and the average number of employees per company is 1.6.
Wow.
Oh, wow.
So it's just a guy and a little bit of
idea.
money to try and kick it
Guy
off.
on a server in his closet, right?
Yeah, spread it all out and hope that if 3 of them hit out of these 160, we'll make it. So that's very odd. There are some real companies. That's not to say all of them are like that, but the vast majority that I've seen have been kind of in that category, kicked off that way. But there are some very good ones that have done well. And a lot of them emulate the States or have seen successes in the States and want to do the same thing in Germany. So it is very thriving. There's a lot of money out there. There's a lot of money being pumped into startups here. And Berlin is unique though, as you've mentioned.
Yeah.
I mean, it's the second. I just read it's the second youngest city after Hamburg in Germany.
Wow.
Good-sized cities. So it has a very young, very very ambitious group of people.
Yeah. I'd like to unpack that more when we come back, Mark. Right now, I want to take a quick break for a word from our sponsor, but thanks so much for joining us, and we'll be right back.
Are you tired of working outside in the heat? Do you hate your boss? Do you want to get paid to sit on your ass and talk for a living? Well, if you answered yes to the last question, then voiceover might be for you. But if you think it's as easy as buying a microphone, hooking it up to your computer, and all of a sudden you're gonna get paid, think again. It's just like your mom told you. You gotta go to school.
You gotta go to school.
And you need to talk to actor, voice actor, director, and producer Jonathan McFadden of Prodigy Talent Training.
I'm Jonathan McFadden.
Jonathan works in the business, so he knows the ins and outs, and he can help you excel in the field you want to. Audiobooks, animation, video games, radio ads, and of course, voiceover. But you can't wait around because classes fill up fast. So get over to calendly.com/prodigytt Yeah, that's a weird word. Here, I'll spell it. CALENDLY.com/prodigy TT. Click new student interview and pick a time that works for you. So listen to your mom and go to Prodigy Talent Training.
You gotta go to school.
And we're back. We're back with Mark Hammer, former CEO of Bloomfire here in lovely Austin. Mark hopped the first plane out of Austin with his wife and daughter and moved to Berlin. So we spent the first part of the show talking about how and why he made that move and how he's finding the climate there in Berlin, particularly the business climate. So Mark, you said being in the former East Germany, the former other side of the wall, you're experiencing that tech startups are done differently there. That it sounds much more like an angel environment than a true VC environment. And I think that's we see a lot of that in Austin, don't we? Or you used to, yeah. It's nothing like the slush of money that's frothing around the Bay Area. Although it's there is more of that moving here, but certainly I think 5-10 years ago Austin was very much the same. It was just a whole bunch of spaghetti thrown against the wall. Let's see what sticks, and what might emerge as a company. So as you navigate that environment, are you finding that the ideas are much more business to consumer, B2C? Are they more B2B, or is it just all over the place?
I think it's both, but it's also and probably the most, I don't know if it's the most money or the most firms starting up is in energy. It's
interesting. Okay.
There's a ton of carbon sequestration and solar and wind, obviously wind and new technologies being developed, or a lot of engineers are bringing ideas to the fore and looking for money to execute on them because they believe they're going to make a difference. And I think a lot of these firms, these VC or angel firms are excited about that because everybody knows that has a lot of potential. So that's a big market for German companies right now. And I would say there's probably more in B2C after that. I would say it's probably more energy and then consumer and then maybe business, even though from my experience, business has been kind of the most successful, even though the big names are with consumer. There's been a lot more successes probably in business than in the consumer world.
No, that strikes me as interesting because those types of business I would think are, need to be much bigger than one guy in a server in his closet.
Yeah, and they all do. And I think their model is, find the right founder or founders, see if they can prove something out. And that can be a very limited prototype. And then let's go find a private equity firm that can actually give them the money to do what they need to do to be successful. And that there have been successes with that model that I've seen. So I think that's a good model. I mean, it's a good way to kind of get their feet in the door, whether that's the founder or the angel, and then to go find the real money to buy out the angel or to let the angel participate and get into a much bigger pie.
Is there something, we have a friend and colleague who is in Australia, and she runs something called CSIRO. And I'm trying to remember what it stands for, but basically it's a public-private partnership, and it's a think tank and research arm that explores different sectors and industries. So you've got energy, you've got food and agriculture production, you've got manufacturing, and it's sort of an internal incubator. Right. They spin up these ideas, they research them together with universities. So they use, university expertise. They get these germ of an idea. planted, and then they see if that seems like it could yield some fruit. Then they shop it around to the private sector, and the government sprinkles some money on it to water it and help it grow. And when it seems like it's something that's viable, then the private sector steps in and says, yeah, we'll take that to market. And sometimes they'll partner with the universities as profit shares or rev shares. I don't quite know how they do the financials after that, but is there something like that in Germany?
There are, in just those areas you talked about. Energy, food. I know a particular firm here who does nothing but food, and they're doing things like vertical gardens and things like that that are going to do well. And I think those make a lot of sense. I mean, any place where you can find, government can help, seed that idea, germinate that idea, makes a lot of sense. And I think everybody's taking advantage of that. And there's a lot of money. I mean, the German government, because of the high taxes and things, they have some money to make those things happen, and they have the will to make those things happen because they know that that's a necessity.
Do you think that's a pivot that's occurring, that more food and energy independence? Do you think that's definitely forefront now?
Totally.
As opposed to, okay.
Totally, absolutely.
So.
Yeah, I think everybody is trying to think about, independence and how they can not be as reliant on. I saw a cartoon the other day, and it actually came out in 1983, and it said something. It was about the pipeline, and it said, "What could go wrong?" And I was like, "Wow, 83." I mean, wow. And so hindsight's 2020, but at least that cartoonist saw this coming in 1983. So
it's gonna be interesting to see if that's a trend going forward for both Europe and the U.S. and other folks, is that real focus on independence over the next decade.
And independence here means something different than it does in the States. I mean, independence here doesn't necessarily mean Germany, which is why they've been trying to establish the European Union as a union. And I do think that there's been some polarization among the leaders, because they've hired some leaders that have seemed a little outside of the bounds of what everybody wanted. And that's causing friction. So who do you rely on? I mean, if the French election had gone differently, what would happen between the German and France relationship, which has been strong for the most part for a long time.
I guess that's the power of strong reminders of the value of things like that.
Yeah, for sure.
So let's pivot a little bit to Bloomfire, and I find Bloomfire pretty fascinating. And you went from leading marketing to COO to CEO, and Curtis and I have this discussion all the time. That is not a normal progression. So I'm excited to hear, how the heck did you walk that progression? Because I even read in your background, you were a product owner, an agile product owner before that. So, I mean, you went a meandering path to get here, and I'd love to hear about it and how that path went.
Yeah. So to start off,
yeah,
I got my degree from the University of Kansas.
Can English lit, I think.
English and art history. Yeah. That's why I was
all you English majors out there.
Yeah.
Your goal.
Exactly.
So I got to about my junior year, and I thought I got to pick a major, and I tried to figure out how many courses I've been taking in each of these various disciplines to figure out the quickest path.
This sounds so familiar.
Because my parents' only mandate out of college was that I graduate in 4 years, and so I tried to figure out how could I graduate in 4 years. I took until my junior year to look at that, and realized, and I had enough courses in English and art history that would be close, so I could do that. And those are the courses.
And then there weren't yet the basket weaving studies programs.
No. They weren't available. Yeah, the Taylor Swift courses and things. And so I decided I was going to major in that. And then when I graduated, I thought, what am I going to do? Like, how am I going to get a job? And I thought, English and art history, maybe advertising. That makes sense. It's a little bit of both. And so I was dating a girl at the time who lived in Southern California. And she said she wanted to move back to Southern California. So I sent a letter, there wasn't email at the time, to the top 50 advertising agencies in Los Angeles. And I said, hey, I'm graduating with a degree in English and art history. I have no experience in anything other than, bagging groceries and working at restaurants. But if you hire me for the summer for free, I'll work for free for the whole summer. And at the end of the summer, if you like me, you can hire me on and pay me. And if you don't, you can let me go and I'll have experience.
Awesome.
And that worked great. That worked great. I got to interview at Gray Advertising at Saatchi & Saatchi, which is Apple.
Yeah.
I got to interview everywhere, and I chose an agency that was clearly short of people because I thought.
So Martin, can I just stop you there? How many letters did you send out? How many
50.
different agencies? 50.
50 agencies. Yeah. And I probably got 8 or 9 interviews.
Yeah.
And because a college graduate for free for a summer, people were like, "What's the downside here?"
Yeah.
That's about the strike ratio for most folks with resumes, even in the paying market. It's 1 in 5, 1 in 10 get a response.
Great. I would do it again for sure.
Yeah, it's a great idea.
And then I started working at this advertising agency, and within 2 weeks they started paying me, so it was great. So anyway,
wow,
awesome.
I started off in advertising, and then I was doing copywriting for a little while, and then I did account management. And then after a while, we moved to my girlfriend, who became my first wife. We moved to Salt Lake City, and because she was in law school, she was going to go to law school there. And when we moved there, I got a job at a software firm that was focused on library science platforms. And so that got me into education, the educational software kind of world. I was in educational software. I worked there. I worked at another firm, and then I ended up at Houghton Mifflin Harcourt, which was they're one of the big firms for software. But before that, I ended up at a company in Austin called Compass Learning, which was great. I was head of marketing there. That was my first head of marketing job. And I loved that job. It was a great company, great people to work with and everything. Did a lot of rebranding, and I learned on the fly. All this stuff was learning, as I go, and learning from mentors, people that I really respected and looked up to and would reach out to for help and guidance. And they were great at that. And we built online learning tools at Compass Learning. And so when Houghton Mifflin reached out to me, they wanted that. They wanted somebody who could help drive their sort of online learning technology. And so I went over there thinking that I could help them do that job, but they wanted me to do it as kind of a one-man band.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, you go out and you be the innovative guy who gets everybody on board with online technology, even though 99.7% of their revenue was driven by books,
by textbooks. Yeah,
it just wasn't going to work, and that job was very difficult from that perspective, and so I wasn't there that long. Shortly after that, I went to work at Smart Bear Software, which was a great company, still is a great company that does very techie stuff for engineers. And I ran sort of product for that team for one division of that company, and really enjoyed that until some internal things happened, and I ended up looking and found Bloomfire, and at Bloomfire. So getting to your question about marketing and COO, CEO. I joined Bloomfire at a time that I think they were struggling, and what they were struggling with was a knowledge management platform is a difficult platform to sell to a company that doesn't know they need it.
Yeah.
It is a great platform if you know you need it. If you've seen the pain and recognize the pain and know there's a potential solution, it has great potential. And so I joined, and when I joined, very quickly, I joined at the same time as our CFO. We joined almost the same day, and preparing for our first board meeting with our board, which was Austin Ventures at the time. He came to me and he said, we're on path to lose about $6 million this year. And so we had a little talk about.
They didn't mention that in the interview?
Yeah, they didn't mention that in the interview. So we
oversight.
knew, so we relatively quickly realized this is going to be tough. And shortly after that first board meeting, the board asked Bill, the CFO, to figure out a path to profitability.
Yeah.
And in that work that he did on his own, he came into my office one day and just said, "Hey, do you think you could run the company?" And I said, "What?" And he said, "I think we could get to profitability relatively quickly, but we can't afford a CEO, and we need to make probably a few other small changes. But our growth rate isn't bad. It's not great, but it's not bad, and we don't need to cut a lot of costs if we can increase revenue a bit." And so he and I went off and talked about it for a while, and he ended up getting the board to approve that plan, which put me in charge. So when I got the COO job, it was really the CEO job without the title, which I was fine with, because the only thing in the back of my mind was, if I screw this up, I have to be a CEO who now has to go figure out how to become a head of marketing again. And who wants to, hire a failed CEO as head of marketing? So a COO job would be a better job from that standpoint. And so, yeah, from that point on, from that point that I was COO, I was running the company along with Bill and everybody else. And really the way I felt about that job was, I just need to find the right people. And the right market, right market fit. We had to figure out, where are we a must-have and not a nice-to-have? Everybody views knowledge management as being, wow, that'd be nice to have, but we've got so many other priorities. When you see it work in an organization, you realize that it should be a massive priority for more companies. Mm-hmm. They should have somebody in charge of it, and they should have somebody, especially for a company, 100 people plus. It doesn't have to, if you're really small, I don't think it's a great fit. Always, it can be. But when you get to, 100 people and you've got, content everywhere, how do you manage it? How do you make it findable? How do you create some process around it so that people can manage that content? And that was really important. And so relatively quickly, we found out that customer support was a huge market. I mean, it was just, when you're on the phone, you need to be able to type 3 letters and get access to the right answers to questions for those agents to be successful on the phone. So that was a no-brainer. But a little bit into my tenure, we found that market insights, which if you're at a large company like eBay or Amazon, you have these market research teams that their job is to go find insights about the customer. Who is our target customer? Why do we charge them what we charge them? Who's the competition? All that information that is really important and traditionally has been siloed. It's been put in a box drive or a Dropbox drive. And I remember we met with Walmart. They never became a customer, but I remember meeting with them, and they gave this example, which was somebody asked, they asked a question of the insights team. The insights team didn't give them any documentation. They went and dug through information to find the answer and then gave them only the answer back. When ideally, that person on the other end would have been able to search for the research themselves, find the answer within the research, understand all the context, understand what year that research was done, understand all that information, which is hugely valuable to them and to everybody else in the organization. And that makes everybody successful.
So Mark, there was, I think, right in there when the struggles were happening. I think that's when I first met you. I know that they were really, you're having trouble figuring out what was going to be. So what was it a defining thing? Was it a slow grind and you just ground towards success, or were there a couple big catalysts that really made a huge difference for you that people can learn from, that here's the kind of catalyst that really made a difference for us?
So I would say there are several things. First, you have to have really passionate employees.
Yeah, we're definitely going to unpack culture and talk about it.
Okay, all right. But culture, I think, is the number one thing.
Awesome.
But from a grind perspective, I do think you have to have your own insights as a company. You have to understand your customer. Why is your customer coming to you? What are they looking for? And then what are those commonalities among those customers that you can draw from? I remember when we found these insights or market research teams that were coming to us and looking at our platform. The first one was a very large company out of Chicago, and they bought our platform. And I remember all of us going, "This is such a perfect fit. Why aren't we finding more companies like this that are looking for our platform?"
So this is the pivot from a customer support focus, which is when I was talking to you, you were customer service focus of quick answers for customer service, into a repository and quick access to market research and research on the company and research on clients.
Repository drives me crazy.
I'm sorry, I said a bad word. I think what do you guys call it? You call it a knowledge something.
A knowledge sharing platform, which is really what it's about. It's about sharing knowledge. It's about taking. I keep saying we. I'll always say we with Bloomfire. The thing that's so great about that platform is that if one person knows a lot, they can share that with everybody so that everybody knows a lot. That's what's so important.
And wasn't your secret sauce there was your search, right? There was something in the search that was better than anything else available, and like the Microsoft SharePoints and things like that.
Right. We developed algorithms that using various technologies that allow us to deep index every word of every file. And so if you understand how to drill down, which most people do, to find the right content using keywords and a combination of keywords and links, you can be very successful within the platform to find what you need, which is very different than searching for content in Slack, which a lot of people do today, or Salesforce or anything else.
It sounds almost like Spotlight on the Mac OS, where it indexes everything in the background.
It's a lot like that, but imagine that combined with a kind of hierarchy that you've set up on your own. That becomes really important, or that we set up with you. That combination is really important. And you mentioned pivoting. We didn't really pivot, so we kept that focus on the customer support, but we found this additional focus on market research and insights. And that finding that other leg, I remember bringing that to the board and saying, we found this other group that really needs what we're doing, and they were just like, I don't understand this.
But the cheering commenced from all the new revenue that was going to come.
It happened later. But at the beginning, and I said, what we did pivot though is all of our go-to-market spend. We ended up taking every dollar of go-to-market and going after that market because it was new. Very few companies there were only 2 other companies really at that point targeting them, and we thought they were doing a much worse job than we were doing.
Let's hear more about that, Mark, when we come back. We're up against a break, but I want to continue unpacking this. Is great stuff. We'll be right back with Mark Hammer on Outspoken.
The Infernal Guard, Book 3, Severance. The 3 pieces of an age-old prophecy have been found, the children who will save the world, until one goes missing. Now it's up to the Guard to find that kidnapped piece of the puzzle, to sever the links between worlds and stop an invasion from the underworld. Will they make it in time? Will this former enemy cooperate, or does her hatred live on? Coming soon wherever audiobooks are sold. Witness the end of the thrilling Infernal Guard trilogy by S.G.D. Singh.
And we're back with the Outspoken Show and our guest, Mark Hammer, coming all the way from Berlin. Thanks for taking time, Mark. We really appreciate you.
Absolutely. Good to be here.
When we last left our hero, he was unpacking his journey from unpaid intern to CEO of Bloomfire, and how he turned that company around. Really, really interesting stuff to me. I'm curious, and Scott, I know you've got more questions, so I definitely want to continue along those lines. But Mark, anytime you take on a company, and all 3 of us have sat in that chair and probably served as consultants as well. So anytime you take on one of those challenges, what's interesting about a C-suite role, particularly if you're coming in as a turnaround artist, is it's usually impossible to have the complete depth of experience at every single one of those potential clients or customers or companies that you join. So to some extent, you have to look to a framework or a process. And did you develop a framework or a process that you can take away to some of the companies, for example, you're now thinking about joining in Germany?
Not really.
I love the honesty.
I would love to say, we did. We ended up at the end of my tenure there, we ended up moving to OKRs, which was sort of brought on by the private equity firm, which I think are great. And we did have goals. I mean, we have goals that we set, and we had measurements against those goals every quarter. So we did kind of do OKRs without the OKR name.
And just for those who aren't familiar, OKRs is
objectives, key results, and key results. And
just they're metrics to run your business.
They're metrics to run your business, and people have different names for them and different processes. And OKRs were, I think Google does an amazing job with OKRs. But and we had metrics, and we had things that we were trying to achieve every quarter. And the one thing that I think we did well, and you mentioned I did turnaround, it was really the team. I mean, we really had an amazing team, and I know we're going to talk about culture. But we hired really good people who were passionate. I mean, passionate, who wasn't a job, it was their livelihood, and they were invested in the company, and they were invested in the success, and they weren't going to stay there if they couldn't be successful. And I think everybody felt like they could be successful. But one of the things that we did that was instituted before I started was to have weekly all hands meetings. And these weekly all hands meetings, we ended up shifting to show those metrics, those quarterly and annual metrics every week.
Mm-hmm.
Nice.
If you're a head of sales and we do that, that could suck, right? That can suck bad.
That is
normative
awesome.
Pressure, I think we call that.
Yeah.
Or if you're head of support, that can suck because you see you see one big churn, and the rest every week from here on out for the rest of the quarter or the rest of the year, we're never going to hit the churn metric.
And it's much better to be the guy that gets showcased of being great than the opposite. Much better.
I agree.
And Curtis, are you recognizing this here? Curtis and I have this discussion all the time about, people that are they do this role, they specialize in it. They like a lot of COOs are CFOs.
Yeah.
And you're not, which I find fascinating because that's more along the lines of what Curtis and I, it was more of a generalist, very, very well-rounded background. So you have a breadth of experience you can take to this C-suite and really be able to pivot from one area to the next and provide the guidance necessary. And I just think it's super cool. And that it just doesn't seem to be as normal now as it used to be.
Yeah, the traditional COO role has really gone away.
Yeah.
A lot of companies.
Yeah.
It's really CFO driven.
And I'll say, just before I left Bloomfire, we promoted somebody who was head of support to be COO. And she's like what you're just talking about, which is somebody who's looking across the business, not a CFO, type, but somebody looking across the business and trying to figure out where to improve. And
fix broken things.
Yeah, and she was huge from the very beginning of my tenure there at Bloomfire, and hugely impactful to the success. Retention went from 55% to about 90 under her leadership, and that team's work. So that was retention is so important in SaaS. I mean, as you guys know.
So let's pivot to culture and start to talk a little bit about that. So tell us. Was that something that you always thought was super important, or it just developed at Bloomfire, or what drove that? And what are your thoughts on culture as far as it relates to performance?
I think it's the number one thing. I don't think you can have OKRs without the right team and the right culture. I don't think it matters, because I just don't think that you're going to be successful. I mean, you can, hit people with a whip or whatever you want to do to try to get them to be motivated, but they've got to be self-motivated. And the way to be self-motivated is to have a team that everybody respects everybody and everybody wants to be successful.
Yeah.
And,
You can't see it right now, but I'm jumping up and down in my chair.
but I just think it's really important. When I joined and I got the role of COO/CEO, we changed out a lot of the sales team. And we did that not because of performance or they were bad people or whatever, but because they were kind of a clique, and they all kind of went to lunch together and came back together and went to dinner together or partied after work or whatever together. And it was very much like two cultures. And that I knew was never going to work. And so
where did you go to get replacements then for your sales?
So we had we kept one of the sales team, Patrick, who was passionate about the product, passionate about culture, passionate about everything else, and had the team built around him and built in his image as opposed to previous images. And
so that was so really like a mini cultural paradigm shift from the Good Old Boys Network and backslapping to someone that's really passionate about your product.
Yeah, and I don't want to discount that team, that previous team. There wasn't that. It was really just we needed a team that was going to be part of the rest of the team. We needed everybody to be cohesive, and they weren't cohesive. And so I felt like it was a really good culture at Bloomfire before I joined. My job, I felt like, was to make it as good or better, to maintain it or make it better. And I knew that would be a positive culture change, even if we weren't successful from a sales perspective. But I also knew that everybody would respect the attempt to bring everybody together under one roof and try to create commonalities.
Can we just dwell on that for one more second, Mark? I think that's a striking point. In my travels, particularly at large companies, there is this. How can I say this most generously? Caretaker mentality of much of upper management, right? Which is first, don't screw with my bonus, right?
Yeah.
Second,
right.
Whatever the flavor of the day is, right? But most importantly, don't screw with my bonus, and don't screw with my boss's bonus. So if sales are not bad, right, and they're tracking positively, for one of my executive leaders to come out and to come and say, let's swap out the sales team.
Gutsy move.
Very gutsy move.
Wow.
And what sort of reaction did that get?
Well, I made that a point to the board at the appointment because I knew that would be,
Oh, that's right. You knew you had an opportunity for a couple things. So you focused on the couple things that you could do to really make a big difference.
And people were just coming to me and saying, hey, this is an issue. I feel like we've got two cultures. I mean, I think it was very obvious to everybody that was an issue. And I felt like if I could make that change and we could pull out of it, we were going to have a dip. I mean, you always have a dip in that situation. Yeah. And we did. We had a big dip.
You can't underestimate that, can you? That connection between sales and the rest of your company. Some people take that for granted because sales, you're right, is so often sitting over here on the side in its own group, and you lose that connectiveness to the rest of the organization. And when you have that is truly, truly special.
And sometimes, you hire a new sales leader and they will not worry about that. It's just like you said, the number, which I get at some point it is about the number. But when you have a chance like I had coming into that, or we had, and Bill was a huge part of all this, the CFO, in deciding to make that change and to realizing we're going to have a dip and hopefully we're going to have faith that we're going to come out of it. Then you take that risk and hope it works.
So Bill, your CFO, was on board with that move as well.
Yeah, Bill saw that as well. I mean, Bill and I differ on a lot of things, but not in business. We seem to be on the same page for a lot of the stuff.
Curtis, I don't know if you know, but they actually ran. There was no COO for a long time. It was Mark as COO, and then the CFO as the CFO, and they just co-ran the company together for a long time with no CEO.
Yeah.
And it's like, it's really an interesting dynamic. And I think it's cool because it removed the financials. You know, you had to know them, you have to review them, you have to understand them, but you don't have to do them. So you could actually go out and fix the weaknesses in the business, which is amazing.
Yeah, I mean, the board was still holding us to the numbers, right?
Yeah, of course. Yeah.
But when we built the plan after this change at the very beginning, we built the dip in. I mean, we built in. We
forecast it.
Yeah.
How big was Bloomfire at that time, Mark?
Oh, 2 million in AR.
And how many employees?
30, I would say 35 probably.
And so there was a similarly sized company in about 2010, 2011 that was brought into, that was doing mobile apps. And they were essentially ostensibly a job shop, right? Doing custom mobile apps. And they had grown from doing design specs to actually building apps and hiring developers and so, and ran that with a gentleman named Jeff Sunshine here in Austin. And Jeff was great. So Jeff came on as the CFO, and they asked me to be CEO. And we were, once we were about a month in, we said, we need to position this for turnaround and sale, right? Because we don't have the resources to grow it. We were saying about 2 million, 3 million, something like that. But about 35, 40 employees in Austin, I think about 75 globally, and some contracting. But we had a similar relationship. I can relate to what you're talking about. We had a similar relationship, and there was a CEO who was the founder, and that's about all I need to say about about that person.
Yeah.
But we, immediately recognized a couple things, really both a culture standpoint and a delivery operation standpoint. I saw a lot of the same things that you're talking about, and it was a learning experience for me as far as how to handle that. And it's certainly things I wish I had done better. We did manage to position the company for turnaround and sale. I think we had seven offer sheets, and but certainly things I wish I would have handled better. However, that relationship between sales and delivery was huge, and it was a big schism. I saw sales off selling in their own corner of the building and not talking to delivery really. Occasionally there'll be a sales engineer on a call, but they were writing checks we couldn't cash, right? They were promising things that couldn't be delivered. So I would have to step in on some of the bigger calls with big corporate customers. And
that always works, right, Curtis? That always works when sales leads product.
Oh, for sure. Yeah. We'll have that for you by Thursday. Yeah. Just send the check now so I can cash my commission.
Who cares about that plan? Let's just let sales lead product. That's better.
Yeah.
One of the things I did not do that I wish, hearing your story, Mark, that I wish I had is really made a bigger effort. So I was working on the sort of technical and process side to smooth that, to make the impedance match, right? But I did make a big effort on the culture side, and wish that I had.
Yeah.
It was a good move. I love that move. That's really, really cool.
Well, and getting to your sales relationships with other departments, we worked on that constantly. Trying to figure, when sales gets gets a deal done, or in the process of getting a deal done, get customer support involved. And our COO, Sam, and Chad, and all these people that worked in CS were constantly, working with sales, trying to understand what was coming down the pike so they could be prepared for it and could implement appropriately, which is really important.
Yeah.
So Mark, we try to ask guests, what's kind of the secret to their success, and in your case, what are the best couple pieces of advice that you would offer to aspiring C-levels or C-levels, trying to transition a startup to private equity? What are the couple things that you think would really help folks out?
Yeah, I mean, when we went into COVID, I told the team, I said, my goal out of COVID was that you would all keep your jobs. You would all be glad you kept, you stayed with Bloomfire, and that you were glad that you worked at Bloomfire during COVID, because I knew there were going to be, companies having trouble. Doesn't seem to be as bad as we thought, but and I think that was really appreciated. I kept going back. I would do, Google forums to the employees, asking them, what can we do more of? Because we kept preaching grace, giving people grace. Understand that people are at home with their kids and their dogs, and trying to do everything they can to be successful from the environment that they live in and work in now, all at the same time. So, I really believe that treating employees as well as you can and recognizing their situations they're in and recognizing their personal life. I knew a lot of personal information about people because they would tell me so that I would understand where they were coming from.
I know what you're saying, but what I'm hearing is really a relentless pursuit of great culture and a culture of performance, and acknowledging what it takes to be a performance-based company. So that's what I'm hearing. Is that accurate? I think performance is driven I think you were cheering earlier because performance is driven so much by culture. It's just if you don't respect your fellow employees, who cares if you get to the meeting on time? Yeah, you're rowing in the same direction in the boat. Yeah, and every week I mentioned this weekly meeting we would have, which used to be face to face with lunch, and then became Zoom. The sales team would talk about the deal they got that week, and that was really important because they would talk about how what a struggle it was to get it. Here are the 10 people that helped me get that deal. Here's a little bit of engineering we had to do to get that deal. Whatever that was so impactful because then it was all these people. And we have a guy in CS, Chad, who's always the first guy to say, when we had shout outs at the end of our face to face, he would say, here are the 3 people that helped me this week. And then everybody else would want to pile on and, talk about other people that helped. That's just so important for culture. And it brings, it shines a light on a lot of people. I don't need a light shined on me. What I want is everybody else to be given recognition for the things they're doing, because I'm not really doing anything except to hopefully facilitate the lights shining, right? And that was really, really helpful. And I think culture is the biggest factor that helped us as a company get to where we were. Fantastic. Man, I did so many. I feel like, and I remember, maybe we had one sales rep who called me out when we asked for feedback. And he said, when sales are bad, you can see it on your face. And we know it because we're living and breathing it. Like I'm hitting 50% of my goal. I know it. And to see it on your face every week or every day in the office isn't helpful. And his name was Jace. And he was absolutely right. And I realized, I think when you become a CEO or get higher up, you think of yourself not as that. You always think of yourself as just one of the team, and everybody else is looking at you differently. And I didn't really get that. And so you're driving that culture. It's you. You're driving the culture, and you don't really, you are, but you let your guard down, or you become the others.
That's a great point, Mark, and big lesson for sure.
It was a big lesson for me. And when he called me out, I was really pissed, and then realized it was 100% right. I need to be the cheerleader. I don't need to be the guy, beating them down when they're down. And that was a great lesson to me. And I think we wouldn't have that conversation if we hadn't asked for it and he didn't feel confident that, he wasn't going to get in trouble for it. In fact, he was going to be praised for it in the long term. And I brought that up to him several times. I asked him, how am I doing? Because, when we're having a bad quarter, I'd ask him, am I doing okay? And he'd say, yeah. And that's part of it, just understanding you're all in the same boat and trying to row together, and how can I behave in a way that will make you more successful or make you feel less self-conscious about the performance you've had, even though I know you're trying. I'll add to the the other one that we talked about is your two-way conversation with sales and including them in the rest of the company and to the feedback to sales, but also that feedback from sales back to the company. I think people underestimate how important that is.
I mean, that connects your company, and I think that's a great lesson.
It's an interesting, when we first started having sales talk about the deals they got, it really changed things. I mean, I think it really brought everybody into the process of sales, and then they would talk about deals they lost too, which is even just as helpful. We lost this to this company, and here's why they said we lost. Price, it's always price. No. But hearing that from them was really important, and it got everybody kind of on the same page, and I think made everybody else think about what can I do to help sales. And CS department, driven by the COO, was a huge factor in our success, because they and she would get on the phone with the team and talk about implementation, talk about how you don't have to worry about this. We've got you. We're behind you 100%.
There's a big one. Trust.
Trust.
You foster trust in your company. That's amazing.
Yeah, trust in your company amongst your employees, but also amongst your prospects. Because they felt like when they had that conversation, when in the sales process, when they were already meeting with CS and hearing about how CS was going to make them prove out the success of the platform long term, that was huge. And we had a guy named Marcus who was the guy who would do the proving every quarter or every year, depending on the size of the company. Go back to them and say, here are your metrics. Here's all the things that you did within the platform, all that your people did within the platform. And here's the impact that had on results. And I mean, that was huge as well.
Well, Mark, we're running out of time here, but I do want to know, before we go, what's next? What are you thinking?
Yeah, I'm thinking. That's what I'm doing. I'm trying to think about what I want to do.
You're thinking
next.
Of thinking and enjoying Berlin?
I'm having meetings with different companies. I'm doing a little bit of consulting. I'm having meetings with other companies, and then I've got a couple of ideas on my own that I'm not sure they're worth pursuing. So I'm vetting those ideas and trying to think about.
I imagine you sitting there in the cafe, with your cappuccino or whatever, and having those meetings in Berlin. So it's a very cool picture. I'm imagining that now.
I'm also doing some writing, getting back to it.
Good for you.
And then I'm also, people in Berlin love burritos. And so I keep thinking about, I should have a burrito truck.
Oh, that's cool.
I don't know.
We'll send you one from Austin.
Yeah, please do. Please do. Yeah.
There's a big country music fandom as well.
Big
in Europe, which is shocking to me when I was living in England. Like,
it
really?
is. It's funny. I know, it's weird.
Yeah. So we'll send you a cowboy hat, a guitar, and a taco truck.
I'm gonna see Jason Isbell here soon, so that's good.
Nice.
That's great. Folks, just wrap before we conclude, Scott. I just want to package up some of the things that Mark was sharing with us. Scott and I have an extensive background working shoulder to shoulder in agile and digital transformations, and it strikes me, Mark, that a lot of what you're talking about are things that are, as you nodding your head, so you probably know where I'm going with this, but a lot of what you're recounting are things that are fundamental to a good agile transition, right? And it's celebrating your victories with your team, building, first and foremost, building a culture of trust, building a culture of mutual respect, the social contract, as we call it, and having visible results that are flat in terms of communication to the organization. Everybody can see, everybody can understand, and everybody can talk about to discuss how we move forward with those. There's some more technical aspects of a good agile transformation as well, but fundamentally, especially in terms of culture, those things are absolutely key. And I think it just speaks to, you never mentioned the word agile once in your discussion about how you approach this, or a framework or anything like that. But I think those are principles that are now so endemic to good management that, it's really sine qua non.
And if you think about that platform, it really is designed for agile. I mean, it is, and in fact was purchased. Some of the people who purchased, the actual buyer was the transformation champion or transformation expert or head of transformation or whatever. And usually that's an agile transformation, because they're trying to figure out iteratively how can they get better. And that's what agile is all about. So yeah, you're 100% right.
Great. Well, listen, it's been wonderful meeting you and spending this time with you, Mark. Thanks for the insights. Thanks for
thanks so much
sharing
for
your
joining
history.
us. That was some
Thanks,
really great takeaways.
Thanks, guys. Really enjoyed it. Thank you very much.
All right. Well, keep us posted on what you're doing next, Mark, and we'll look for a postcard from Berlin.
Yeah, with a coffee, having your cappuccino, or a coffee cup, having your cappuccino. So, and before we go, big shout out to our producer, Brad Thomas. Brad, thanks for all you do. We really appreciate it. And to our audience, thanks so much for listening and watching us today. And without you, there's no us. And until next time, take care. From the Outspoken Show with Scott and Curtis.
Bye for now.
Bye.